Indiana has been the biggest story in college football for the past 2 years. Curt Signetti turned this program overnight. We've never seen a turnaround as drastic as what we are witnessing right now down in Bloomington. And I don't think this is just a feel-good story that's going to wear off, and in 2026, Indiana's going to fall off into irrelevancy. I feel like Curt Cignetti is turning Indiana into a powerhouse program for at least the next decade. When he says that he wins, Google him, he ain't lying. He can come off a little bit bashful, a little bit cocky and arrogant, but he backs up everything on the field. Look at what he built at James Madison. A lot of those players that he was winning with at JMU are the same players that he's dominating college football with right now at Indiana. And normally, you don't take a team that mostly is comprised of G5 level players and still dominate with them and arguably the toughest conference in college football if you aren't an elite talent evaluator and an elite head coach. I view Curt Signetti in the same way I view Kalen DeBoer. These are guys that have the ability to win with anybody as long as you give them decent amount of resources to do so. Look what Kalen DeBoer did in 2 years at Washington. Before Kalen DeBoer took that Washington job, that program was about to completely be burned to the ground by Jimmy Lake. And Kalen DeBoer came and saved it and had them playing for the national championship in only his second season as a head coach. He did way more with less. That Washington team that made it to the national championship was one of the most least talented teams to ever make it to a national title game based off recruiting rankings. The teams that normally are in those kinds of games are the ones that have top 10, top 15 rosters from a talent standpoint. And Washington had the 34th rated roster in America that season. They went to the national championship. But since Washington is a program that can give you good enough resources that if you are a good coach, you can punch up with your weight class. And Curt Signetti is doing the same thing at Indiana. Indiana has been viewed as a basketball school for the majority of our lifetime. So if they have a bunch of resources to pour into the basketball program, why wouldn't they be able to pour the same amount of resources that they do into basketball, into football as well? And Curt Signetti has shown that you don't need to coach at a blue blood program like Penn State, LSU, or Florida to have success. As long as you go to a program that's willing to give you what you need to win, that's all that matters. And Fernando Mendoza probably has been the best transfer portal pickup that any team made this offseason. And when Fernando Mendoza leaves for the NFL draft next year, his younger brother is going to be filling in his role. So I think the transition at quarterback is going to be pretty seamless, which is what gives Indiana a leg up on the rest of the Big Ten. What separates the Big Ten from the SEC is that you can win in the Big Ten having average, below average quarterback play. Look at Minnesota and Iowa. They've been doing it for years. And the SEC, on the other hand, if you have average or below average quarterback play, regardless of how good of a coach, regardless of how good of a team you are, you're not going to have a lot of success in the SEC, i.e. look at Texas, look at Auburn. The quarterback play hasn't really been that good for them this year, and they're suffering because of that. Indiana does have to worry about that. And they have the advantage over the majority of the Big Ten because of them always guaranteed to have some of the best quarterback play in this conference. Curt Signetti has also ramped up Indiana's recruiting because when he signed that big-time extension with Indiana, they also told him and they guaranteed that they will pour more resources into the football program to allow him to get more of those blue-chip recruits because Curt Signetti isn't an idiot. He's not a novice. He knows that you still need to have blue chip talent in order to beat a team like Ohio State or Alabama in the national championship. And with Mark Cuban being one of his top donors now, he's going to have that NIL infrastructure now that's going to allow him to be up there with the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world. And he doesn't need a $28 million roster to do so. If you just give Curt Signetti, 18, 19, $20 million to assemble a team, he can win with that. Because with how good of a coach he is, he can maximize what he's given. But if you give him the same resources that Ohio State and Texas and Georgia have, then you can be looking at somebody who could end up having one of the most dominant programs in college football for well over this next decade. And I think that Curt Cignetti is the large reason why you see so many coaches like Brian Kelly, James Franklin getting fired. Because if you're Penn State, you just lost at home to an Oregon team that lost by 10 at home to Indiana with a far less talented roster. More people are going to be looking for the next Curt Signetti, the next Kalen DeBoer. They're going to be looking for that instant gratification. They're going to be looking for that overnight success. In a sense, Curt Signetti kind of is going to become the gold standard for what you're looking for if you are a big-time program with big-time resources and a lot of money to spend. You expect for a coach to come in and have instant success. Because if Curt Signetti is doing it at a program that's been a bottom feeder in college football for the majority of our lifetime, these other programs like Florida, LSU, Auburn, they're going to have even more higher expectations because they're going to say, if Curt Signetti is doing this shit at Indiana, why can't we have a head coach who can do the same thing for us? You don't find guys like Curt Signetti every day. They don't grow on trees. He also comes from the Nick Saban coaching tree. And Nick Saban has a very successful coaching tree, probably the most successful coaching tree in the history of college football. Yes, he has had a fair share of assistants that haven't really worked out, like Billy Napier, Will Muschamp. But ultimately, I think when you look at Curt Signetti, he just has a good eye for talent. He's a very good talent evaluator. And he also has assembled one of the best staffs in America. And the majority of his coordinators are probably going to get hired elsewhere because when you're having success at Indiana, other schools like, hey, give us one of those dudes, man. They cooking at Indiana with less. Imagine what they can do with more. And that's the thing. When you have a head coach like Curt Signetti that's doing more with less at Indiana, that's sustainable because it shows that you don't need to have the most talented roster every year. People think with the amount of experience that Indiana's going to lose next year, that instantly guarantees that they're going to fall off. If Curt Signetti could take a bunch of players from JMU and have success with them at Indiana, he can do the same thing with anybody else because the dude just has an eye for talent and he's not solely banking on the transfer portal. And even if he was, I would trust him a lot more to be able to maintain this success more than I would trust a coach like Mike Norvell, because Curt Signetti isn't living and dying by the transfer portal. If anything, he's doing a really good job of mixing the transfer portal in along with high school recruiting, but we haven't really seen how good he is recruiting out of high school because he's only been at Indiana for 2 years. And normally it takes 3 seasons to get a full recruiting cycle out of high school on the field. So for all we know, the recruiting classes that Indiana has brought in last year and this year could be even better and have better teams than what Curt Signetti currently has right now. I think that the floor for Indiana football is incredibly high as long as Curt Signetti remains in Bloomington, which they gave this dude $93 million fully guaranteed to stay. So they got the money to keep him. And they also got the money to pour into NIL to get these blue chip recruits out of high school. And guys want to win. And guys actually are going to be really turned on to Curt Signetti's coaching style. They like a guy that's going to talk shit. They like a guy who isn't afraid to pop it every once in a while because that's relatable. And Curt Signetti, although he's one of the older coaches in college football, he relates well to younger players. And no matter what, even if he was a scumbag like Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer is one of the biggest POSs in the history of college football. But guys want to play for him because if you win, guys want to play for that. If you're getting guys to the NFL, guys want to be developed. So Curt Signetti, I think that the success that he's having at Indiana is more than sustainable. Now, is Indiana going to routinely win 11, 12 games every season? Probably not. Because just with how college football is, with the amount of parity that we have more than ever taking place within this sport, You're going to have a down season or two where maybe you go 8-4, 9-3. It can happen to anybody. It happened at Alabama. It can happen to Georgia. It could very well happen to Texas. So everybody is going to have a down season or two. But the main thing is, if you're a coach for 8 years at a program, are you going to have more 10-win seasons than you are to have 9-win seasons or less? I think that's going to be the case for Curt Signetti.